Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Benno Community Podcast, where we have real conversations with people who are making a difference and thinking about the future in new ways. I'm Ben, founder of Benno Community and your host today. And today I'm really excited to talk with Stefan Bergheim. Stefan has a pretty unique journey. He used to work in big banks, forecasting economic trends, but at some point, he shifted gears and started focusing on something more people centric. How we can imagine and shape better futures together. He's worked with UNESCO, the German government, and leads projects that help cities and communities rethink what a good life really means. We'll talk about his story, the role of imagination and hope in future thinking, and what he's learned from working with all kinds of people around the world. So, let's get into it. Thanks, Stefan, for joining me. I'm really happy to have you today in this episode. And maybe before starting our conversation, you want to introduce more yourself and also mention something really important about yourself as well.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much for having me, Ben. I'm looking forward to a great conversation. So maybe just adding a few points to the path of mine that you already described so well. Um, as a little background, I'm trained as an economist. Mm, and so it's natural to work with forecasts there. And I was taught at university that basically when we can control the economy by the central bank raising or lowering interest rates, or by the government raising or lowering spending. I love the idea back then. This control, everything can be calculated, everyone is rational, and so on and so forth. So it was kind of an easy world to live in. It made total sense. But over time, obviously, I discovered that it didn't make sense. It's not reflecting how we humans really work and how societies work, how economies work. So I got a lot into sociology, a bit of philosophy, complexity theory, and then it started to not make that much sense anymore. And I also at that time moved into the beyond GDP sphere. So I did lots of forecasts on GDP growth, or gross domestic product, as a measure of how many final goods and services are produced in an economy. And it was the main measure that we use as economists in the financial industry. There's no way around it. But then there were people who pretended that this is the only thing that's important to society and humanity, and that of course didn't make sense. So I uh, did a lot of research on happy capitalism, measures of well-being. So what are other aspects that go beyond and maybe relate to some extent to GDP? And I also found out that my home country, Germany, doesn't do all that well in a lot of those broader measures of well-being. And I thought, well, this is an important topic, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life in the financial industry. So I quit my job and said I want to start a think tank that is focusing on well-being, and especially in Germany, because there's a significant need for some improvement apparently here. And then we started these, as you mentioned, we call it the quality of life projects. We started in Frankfurt. This is where I live. So inviting people to think about, okay, what does a great future of Frankfurt look like? We went out, lots of participation, lots of seldom heard voices that were included in that project. And we created visions from what people told us, and we also created indicators. This is where the quantitative person in me comes through. I do want to be able to measure where we are. So to also to move to the final step, if we're already there, what people want in the future, there's not much need for action. But if there is a big gap between the ideal situation and the present, what the indicators are telling us, then we might want to think about what to do about it. So I need the quant part, and then we have the link to action, which is still something that is important. But also, and maybe final link to what I'm doing today, I also found out that just focusing on one future, one vision, and even if it's sourced from a lot of people, may be a bit too narrow. And that's why in 2015, I got fascinated with the futures literacy field. I was at the conference in Trento that Roberto Poli organized, the first anticipation conference. And ever since I'm in the futures literacy field, I'm still linked a bit to the well-being sphere, and I'm very much linked to the collective intelligence knowledge creation idea, and I'm very much also linked to the relevance for action, but I'm more open to different types of futures. And I also wrote a book that also includes this title, Futures Open to a Variety. So that's kind of the program, my program these days.
That's great. You add lots of points to my introduction. And the point is, I think that was a big shift from the previous life to the new life. I mean, uh, instead of focusing most on forecasting using imagination and consider future not as just one future, and yeah, then engaging in futures literacy, which was the main reason I approached you, because I found that you are really now these days and currently busy with the concept of futures literacy. You are running futures literacy lab and try to help people to think in a different way about futures. To kick things off, what does futures literacy mean to you in your own words?
Well, as a definition, futures literacy is a competence in general. This is the definition I use in my work with my customers, with teenagers across the board. It's a competence to work with the future in different ways, with different methods, depending on the context why you want to use it. If you're asking more about what it does it mean to me as an individual, obviously before I was working in very large organizations, large corporates. I had my clear-cut, defined role that I had to fill. I had clear expectations within the organization, what Stefan ought to be doing. Nowadays, or for the last 16 years already, I'm a freelancer, I'm self-employed, which brings with it a lot of uncertainty. But on the other hand, also a lot of control possibilities. No one is telling me these days what I'm supposed to be doing, which can be very positive because it has a lot of freedom, but it also requires that I have to decide what I want to be doing, what kind of present I'm supporting, and also what kinds of futures I'm leaving open with what I'm doing these days. So there's a lot of uncertainty, of course, in my life, but I hope, I like to think that this competence of futures literacy makes it a bit easier for me to handle that uncertainty, to work with that uncertainty. But that's a story I'm telling myself maybe to feel good.
Yeah, great. Makes sense for me as well. And maybe I can add some more points, which is about not just uncertainty, also we need to cope with the challenges related to ambiguity, non-linear, you know, atmosphere. You sometimes even the things are happening in a very complex slash complicated world. That's why in terms of thinking about what's happening, it seems sometimes we have no idea. We have no idea what futures hold for us. And then, I mean, in futures literacy, I learned how, as you mentioned, we can navigate and maybe bring some new opportunities that we have no idea about them. But maybe it's a good idea, as I mentioned. You've run a lot of futures literacy labs. Is there one moment or a story that stands out to you? Maybe something that's really surprised or uh, moved you, and you think it's really helpful for us to share with us as well?
Well, there are a lot of things in a futuristicity laboratory that we are trying to enable, trying to allow, that we're designing the lab so that these kinds of things can happen. So there's kind of intentional that in general something new happens or some insights are being created by the participants. So that's part of the overall project of a future literacy laboratory. Um, what exactly is being created, we usually cannot know. We don't want to know, and it's not possible. That's what you mean by not being able to know. So we're working towards creating something, enabling something, providing the soil on which some seeds can fall and maybe create something new. But what exactly it is that is being created, that is emerging. So another important term in this field, obviously, is the term of emergence.
That's right.
We want something to emerge, maybe, maybe not. But what exactly it is, we don't know. And frankly, I don't often recall, because it's usually super specific to the individuals who are in the laboratory. So they realize, there's a new thought, new to them individually. Maybe that they themselves don't really understand yet because it's new. If it wasn't new, they would be able to sort it into their existing structures. And for me as an outsider, uh, usually I cannot at all understand what this is about, which is a good sign. If I don't understand it, if it's not in my existing frame of thinking, then there's a good chance that this really something has emerged. So what I'm trying to say with these long words is I don't harvest and I don't recall any specific novelty aspects. They don't make sense to me, most, or maybe at the time in the lab they make sense maybe to me, but maybe not anymore, and they might not make sense to the listeners. Uh, it happens, and you can see it in the eyes of the participants. You can see the sparks in the eyes and the smiles that they have, and or the wonder that they're expressing when something happens for them. So, and that's the impression I'm trying to create, or this is the feelings I'm trying to create in the labs, as if they are focusing on novelty. Some of the labs focus on connections, on meeting others and getting to know each other, which is also important. But if it's focusing on novelty, this is the feelings.
Yeah, exactly that point you mentioned, for example, because in some workshops I organized in the reframing phase, I found that surprising moments. I mean, people suddenly surprised, oh, I can think outside the box, but how? And based on my imagination, I can think in a different way how to develop solutions for my current challenges, for example, or problems or whatever. And that's really nice, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, this is when we do the reframe, or often in the labs that I run, most of the times I invite participants to create their alternative futures themselves, based on the assumptions that they have discovered in the first phase. And creating alternative futures, imagining these different futures that go beyond the ideas of this is likely or not likely, because they've covered that ground before, and also go beyond the idea I want this to happen and I don't want this to happen, which they all already covered in the desirable futures phase. futures that let go of those criteria, of those categories, are really difficult. That's quite a challenge for participants. And we tell them this need not be a future at all that actually becomes reality. This is just a future that you imagine for playing with it, for generating new ideas. And to me, most of the time, the real novelty comes in the phase afterwards, when we invite participants to look at all the futures that they have discussed. When they look at, okay, so what is it that we were predicting, that we were expecting at the beginning? And then what are the futures that we want to happen, that we desire to have? And then look also again at the alternative future, the reframed future. And then looking across these three different types of futures, then they discover, look, this doesn't make sense, or there's some new spark coming out. That there were a seed maybe that was in the expected futures. And then in the light of the alternative futures, all of a sudden you see something new. This is the most exciting phase. It's tricky. Have to give people time. It can be really confusing also, because novelty is confusing, emergence is confusing, and that's the whole point of it.
But still, I'm curious to learn more from you, because you know better than me that most of us, I mean, people are usually thinking about future by using the past. And, our understanding towards future already framed based on, for example, my language, my background, the culture, the religion, I don't know, even Hollywood movies. Lots of things already shaped my understanding, and even I have no, I mean, it's not kind of, uh, I'm not aware of them even sometimes. That's why when I'm thinking or when I'm trying to imagine alternative futures, still it seems I'm thinking in those frames. How we can, I mean, cope with this specific situation? How you usually try to help people to think outside the box, even push them to think about really, alternative futures, not just some simple things based on what I've already learned from, for example, Hollywood movies, Marvel movies, or something like that.
Yeah, you're totally right, and this is not going to go away. We are all shaped by our past, obviously. But as, all the things that you mentioned, the movies we've watched, the books we've read, the families we grew up in, that is all shaping how we think about the future. That's obvious, and that also links to the theoretical basis in futures literacy, so the theory of anticipation from Robert Rosen, where he says we all have those models, all living beings, not just us humans, but all living beings have models about the future. And of course they come from the past. Where else would they come from? So one thing we can do with the participants is, and that's super important and rarely done in other contexts, is make people become aware of those facts and become aware, yes. I mean, it sounds like a very obvious insight for maybe for listeners of your podcast, but not for everyone, maybe out there. We are shaped by our past experiences, and my past experience, my image of the future maybe comes from the Terminator movie, depending on age and where you grew up and which culture and which language. And then the next step comes in, and there are other people in the room who have a different experience of the past, who have watched different movies, read different books, studied different topics, came from different families, different cultural backgrounds. And that's the next super important step, to connect those different images, those different models, and bring them into a conversation. Say, one can also look at topic, whatever it is, topic, future of learning, future of the metaverse, future of AI, whatever it is, one can look at it through a different lens than my own lens. And that is already very, very powerful. There are obviously people out there who know all this already. They've done that million times and they can do it easily. They have that understanding. They have the practice of it. Or in my terminology, they are already quite future literate because they have that practice there. You can go much faster but for a lot of people, it's the basics that are crucial. And for those people who maybe struggle with revealing their own images, their own models, maybe you don't have to do all that much of a reframe and alter future. It's already a large challenge for them to reflect on their own models and on the models of the others in the room. And maybe that's already the end of the story. That's already very helpful, I hope, for those people. And others, as I mentioned, want to go faster, quicker. Maybe the innovation is important, and then we do different exercises and focus a lot more on the reframe.
Stefan, you've worked on quality of life processes, as you mentioned, across various cities and contexts over time. How has your view of data, indicators, and trends evolved, especially in terms of how they support people in rethinking the future?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the data, where do the data come from, or the numbers? Let's put it in numbers. Where do the numbers come from? Obviously, past. That's the only way. All the numbers are about the past, and then you can extrapolate. That's what my PhD thesis is actually about, modeling forecasts for GDP growth for different countries, and it's effectively an extrapolation. So we use models from the past and we claim, okay, it's always been like this and will continue to be like that. Um, it is helpful as a baseline, and we do cover this in the Future Literacy Lab. In the first phase, we ask, okay, so what are the things that you are extrapolating effectively? We don't usually put it in these words, but it's effectively about forecasting, predicting, using numbers from the past and saying, okay, I'm pretty sure, like, for example, life expectancy. There is a number of things out there in the world that will probably continue. Life expectancy has always increased in the best countries by 3 months every 4 years. So that will likely continue. And maybe other forecasts as well. So as a basis, it is helpful. There are some things that are stable. But there's also an and. I love the fact there are things that are stable. It would be very difficult for us to get up in the morning if we had no idea of how whether our subway would be driving. But like these kind of things, I want solid predictions. I want solid predictions when I cross the street. I don't want a car in my city running at 100 kilometers an hour because I can't predict it. So this stability, I think, is helpful. Basis, great. But of course, it's not describing the whole picture. There are some new things coming up, and there the data of the past obviously are not enough. There I have to create my own, or participants have to create their own data, their own images, and maybe we can, collect them, analyze them, and create a new database from them. Maybe then it's not numbers anymore. Maybe then it's more a qualitative analysis. Like I did one with a lot of assumptions that people revealed in the labs, and then I clustered them and created a new database. It's also data, but it's not in numbers.
Speaking of data, uh, just now it came to my mind. When we want to think about data and we want to focus more on big data, then maybe it's not possible for us, I mean, as human being, to cope with them maybe in a usual way, which means maybe it seems there are some new opportunities can help us to think or act or even cope with the data and the things like that in a different way. I prefer to name it as kind of extended mind by using AI opportunities. You know, sometimes people think about, for example, AI as tools, but I think we can consider them in a different way. They are not tools. For example, when I'm using these glasses, I can see the world in a different way, even sometimes more clear. It's kind of extended body for me, which means sometimes using, for example, AI, or I don't know, maybe in the future, quantum computing can help us to, use the previous experiences, the data, the numbers in a larger scale in a different way. What do you think about it? Have you ever worked in this specific area? Because just now I thought about that and I just wanted to share with you.
Well, of course, it's a huge issue these days. AI, quantum computing, all those possibilities. It's visible every day, and we all use it. The question is, what are we using it for, and what can it really do for you? And there, maybe it's my age, maybe it's my background. I'm more on the skeptical side. Of course, it's great if the AI can, like in an insurance company, read all the incoming emails or faxes or whatever, and sort them by client number and say, okay, this has a change of address, and here he wants to quit the contract and run it automated. All fine, lovely, and it saves a lot of time for humans. But it's all structured and coded. It can be described. So AI, please find out what this person wants to have. Identify the address, identify the name, identify the customer number, and identify all doable, lovely, wonderful. If that's what AI does, that's what computing does, all good. What I'm skeptical about is whether AI can do what we talked about before, namely be innovative, create emergence, be creative. That I just don't see at this stage. The AI does create a lot of stuff, but that's just random or probabilistic additions of sentences, and then I have to go as a human, I have to go through it and see, okay, does it make any sense? Is it really novelty, or is it just rambling? Is the AI just rambling on and creating a different sequence of words and sells it to me as some novelty? So if you look at people like Mihai Nadin, who's been very active in the theory of anticipation, or Ilkka Tuomi, who has looked very deeply into the AI, those I recommend. Maybe you do a podcast with Ilkka on AI. That would be super interesting. I follow those people for guidance on AI.
It's funny. This is my point. I'm not talking about AI as kind of external tool that I can use. I mean, for example, by using these glasses, even sometimes I forget that I'm using glasses to see the world. It's part of me, part of my body, in a sense. What I'm talking about, maybe there is a new opportunity we haven't had so far, which is we can extend our mind not by using AI as a tool, by adding something to our, the ability of thinking. It's not about, okay, I'm outsourcing the imagination. It helps me in a different way. We are merging these two areas, same as my eyes and these glasses, to see the world in a different way. This is my point. And then we use data and numbers to leverage my imagination towards future.
Yeah, again, I've heard these stories for many years and read about it for decades. Maybe they were in the cyberpunk science fiction books that I read
Mhm.
in the 90s. Maybe there were some elements of it. I hear where it comes from, yet my imagination is not large enough to see that this is going to be happening. For also, and my knowledge, my understanding of the systems and the structures behind it indicate that it's not very likely to
Oh,
happen. Let's put it this way.
okay. Okay, okay. So, uh, let's go for the next question I wanted to ask you. As I know, you've been part of some pretty big conversations between science, politics, and communities. What makes a future thinking process meaningful, and how do you deal with power dynamics in those spaces?
Well, one thing is that there are different systems, obviously, in a society. As the think tank I'm running is called the Center for Societal Progress, and society is, I learned from the sociologist, is the sum of all the communication happening in a country or in a society. So it's about communication, and there are different subsystems out there who have different ways of how they communicate, also different incentive structures. Like the business world that I spend a lot of time has its specific currency. Academia has its specific language structures, incentive structures. Politics, the media, religion. So there are all sorts of different structures. But as you say, what is similar to them, power is an issue everywhere. And
Yes.
so it is something we need to deal with in all the structures, in all the processes that we do. We learn about it, and it's obviously not trivial at all. Starting with the idea of innovation again, that we had a number of times here in this conversation. If something novel happens, if a novel idea is created, emerges, and wants to be out in the world, wants to live, or someone wants to give it energy, the danger is that this new idea challenges existing power structures, existing allocation of financial resources, of time resources. So that doesn't make it pretty for those in power in particular. So what we need as a prerequisite to work like the way we have described here so far is people who understand these structures and are saying, okay, I do have the power to convene people. I do have resources. Um, but I also have the openness and the understanding that novelty is necessary for us to m- maybe continue to exist, or as a society to function, or maybe to find out that we shouldn't be existing as an organization, as a company, because it doesn't make sense what we're doing. It could also be an insight. And I'm ready to at least hear that insight, and then we go back to power. Then this is when we usually leave as designers and facilitators of this collective intelligence knowledge creation process. The people in power still have the power to decide what to do with those insights, whether they want to close the business line, for example, or whether they want to follow up on the new product idea, or if they want to do a new research project or whatever. That's obviously not for me to decide. I'm the outsider. I'm the facilitator and the designer. So this is where the power comes in. But the main condition is people are ready also to listen to the views of other people. and reflect as a result on what they have been doing so far. And that is not, I'm repeating myself, not easy for a lot of people because it's new. You have to somehow find a way. It takes some strength, some internal stability of this person to say, yeah, okay, no, it totally makes sense. And it needs, maybe the last sentence on this, it needs a basic understanding of complexity that we talked about. A basic understanding that the future n- need not necessarily continue as it always has been, which it had never done, but we pretend that the future, or like to pretend for our own stability in a business context, that the future will just stay as the past. If you understand that this is the case, then you're ready, then you're open to have these kinds of conversations.
Nice, nice, nice. I was thinking about the right balance between expert knowledge and the voice of everyday people in your work. How do you find the right balance between these two ones, and has that changed for you over time?
Well, my current take on expert knowledge is that everyone is an expert. For most topics that are really relevant for an organization or a society overall, everyone has a perspective on it. So it makes sense to listen to as many, also the what I mentioned earlier, the seldom heard voices, those maybe less powerful people who are maybe difficult to reach or have been uh, not motivated or aren't motivated themselves, or whatever the reason is, they're not usually part of a conversation, to bring them on board, because they all have their perspective on a topic. They all have their models. They all have some understanding. They all have some images also. And now back to the theory, Robert Rosen, theory of anticipatory systems. They also have a perspective on the environment, on the outside of my organization or my structure, whatever we're looking at. They all see something, they sense something, and it is important to bring that on board. How we weight this is a different matter, but in the first place, to bring it all on board is important. And also what we can do there and say, okay, now we've discovered a lot of perspectives on topic, whatever. Um, and now there are some issues, maybe some questions that can be meaningfully addressed or solved by experts, people who know something about the topic that the others may not know. So this is where hardcore expertise, like a technician, like when I talk about AI, I'm not an expert on AI. But I do consult, I do speak with people who are experts and try to learn more. And then we discover, okay, maybe we need to bring in some experts on topic X, Y, Z and show our assumptions to them, and then say, no, 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 this is, or they tell us, then, okay, now this is not how AI really works. You're assuming some stuff, Stefan, that is not how it really works. And we learn from them. That's super. To me, that comes at the second step. First, I want to see what the kind of the field is saying, what the collective is saying, because if I bring in the experts first into an event, into a conversation, then the all the talk, the conversation later only circles around the expert input. So have
Yep.
this later.
Yes, and the point is, even sometimes experts they are expressing kind of bias, which means they are thinking in a specific frame, and sometimes, uh, in terms of, imagination, maybe the outliers can think differently about what they are thinking could be possible or not possible, you know? Sometimes for disrupting something, I mean, disruptive innovation, disruptive imagination in a positive way, you need to think as an outlier. But experts sometimes, you know, they maybe sometimes they cannot think in a different way. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I totally hear you. And partly, and using again the future literacy terminology, partly because for whatever reason, they're not making visible the assumptions of their work. They're not revealing their anticipatory systems, to use in the tech terminology, and they're not ready to have those assumptions revealed, made visible, being discussed. In some cases, frankly, I also see people who are not even willing to have terminology discussed. You use the word intelligence, for example. What do you mean by intelligence? How do you define intelligence? Can we have a discussion on that? And then, yeah, it goes places or it doesn't.
Stefan, you see more patterns between sectors and genders than between countries. Am I right?
Well, I've worked in both on the well-being, quality of life, and on the Futures Literacy Lab with many people from different countries and different cultures. In the well-being, it turns out that humans see or feel things are important, uh, basically the same wherever. It's social connections, it's health, it's a good education. Where you put your individual priorities in your society really depends on your starting point, and where there's a need, where the indicators come in. But in general, it's the same across the world. And also in terms of images that people have about the future from different countries, and also from different sectors. We did projects with people in different companies a while ago, and the next week was mostly with students. And the images of the desirable futures were more or less identical.
You are talking about the event, the future of cities.
Well, no, I'm talking about futures literacy laboratories here, but the same. It's the same for futures of cities. Future of cities. Everyone wants good housing. Everyone wants well functioning mobility. Wherever you go in the world, everyone wants health. Everybody wants good social relations. But and we're seeing this in especially in the visioning part of the futures literacy laboratory. We see it there as well. Where I do notice some differences, which I haven't really explored to the end, is that women tend to have more of an inclination towards futures literacy. And in most of the events that I host, it's most of the partners and the participants. It's oftentimes it's 2/3 women in those events, and also in terms of the images that people create. So yeah, the men are, for whatever reason, and this is slippery territory. I'm not an expert, so please, if anyone listens to this, take it with a grain of salt. Men, I mean, like myself, I'm trained as an economist. Plan, predict, and control. We love the controlling part. We love the tech part of it. Mm, and women are more into the, on average, in general, I have to say, seem to be more into the connections, relations, feelings, sentiments, and all that. So for me, what I'm obviously aspiring to is connect the different perspectives. Again, as I said before, having different backgrounds, different models, and if it's a gender difference, fine. There is a lot of differences out there. The challenge is to bring them into a conversation and create something, maybe together, maybe individually, that is helpful for the overall, whatever the good is, organization, society overall. So maybe the yin yang Asian approach might be an appropriate image here, or the walking on two legs. You need both.
Good, good. I think I already told you. I 20 something years ago, I started my journey in academia with philosophy. And throughout these years, I'd been thinking a lot about some concepts, specifically hope, and recently a lot about imagination because I engaged in futures literacy and things like that. Hope and imagination are clearly important in your work. How do you make a space for them and why are they so important to you? I mean, both of them.
Both of them. They're as you mentioned, they're obviously, connected, and imagination is obviously crucial in any futures work because the future doesn't exist in the present. It only exists in our imagination. It only exists as anticipation. So if we talk about the future, there's no way around working with imagination. It's a precondition and different imaginations. And hope is, yeah, uh, not trivial these days to be hopeful with all the challenges that we are facing or that the planet is facing. But to me, there is also no alternative to it. I mean, hopelessness or giving up or only being fearful of the future I don't find it helpful. It's no fun. I see, of course, where it's coming from, but I try hard maybe, or maybe, I ease into more the hope, area, also because it's more conducive to agency and action. If I don't have hope, if I don't have an image of yes, I can contribute something, I can add, I can do something, I can influence the path of whatever, my neighborhood, my family, my city. If I don't have that hope, yeah, then I might give up right away. And I'm not able to, I'm not willing to accept this. So I'm banking on hope. Also, of course, understanding that we shouldn't be naive. We shouldn't be creating some imaginaries that is just so unrealistic, so detached. I mean, we can do it as an exercise, but as something that is an actionable future, we have to start where we are right now. And also, again, in the Futures Literacy Lab, we come into the present. We use the future for the present. We have to start with our actions in the present with the existing systems, but kind of with a sense of direction. Okay, I want to contribute. I'm hopeful that the future can go into direction, whatever. And that allows agency. But not, again, not being naive about some fairy tale futures and not bank on it because that's going to be disappointing.
What I understand, you see a kind of a strong connection between agency, hope, and imagination. And it seems for me, when you are talking about them, you cannot imagine one of them without another. It seems they have kind of strong connection between each others, which means based on that hope, it seems I can think about my imagination, and with imagination, I can bring hope in my life. And by these two ones, I can focus on taking agencies towards future. Am I right?
Well, this is how I like to think about it. But of course, we can imagine the counterfactual. I mean, I can imagine a dystopia where there is no hope for me and humanity and the planet. And then there is agents, well, maybe not the agency to prevent the dystopia, but maybe as well. But also there's some agency for me what to do about it. Then yeah, I move onto a small island somewhere or into the mountains and hide in a cave or whatever. Yeah, I think it's possible to see without hope agency. But then also, if I'm making this up because I haven't really thought about it before. But why am I moving to a cave in the mountains? Because I hope that I'll survive the dystopia through that. So we're stuck again with all three being relevant in my agency. But maybe the listeners of the podcast here have some other ideas of can we create a scenario where one isn't in place.
They can also share their thoughts, I mean, in comments or even share with you, with us directly. Looking ahead, what are you most excited about in the future of futures literacy?
In the future of futures literacy, it's a field that is constantly emerging, where there is a lot of knowledge creation, collective intelligence knowledge creation happening already, where we learn from each other. So what's your practice? What's my practice? What's your experience? What are you reading? What are you doing? So it's growing, of course. I mean, that's maybe a true monumentalist perspective. But there's more. There's increasing interest in the field. We have been training people in German language on how to run futures literacy laboratories. About 100 people we've trained so far. Mostly practitioners who are now running labs in their own context. And now in May, we're starting the first training online in English with people from Brazil, the US, Canada, UK, Italy, so on and so forth. So at least what I'm seeing is growing interest and growing connections across the field, growing learning, exploration together, learning from each other, and at the same time maintaining or allowing a large degree of diversity in the practices and the foci that people have. Some people from academia, some people in the political sphere, some people from the business sphere, some people from different backgrounds. There's people coming in from design, for example, who have or product design. There's lots of people from design thinking. There's psychologists in the field who approach this from the individual level. There's economists. There's lots of different perspectives, and connecting them as we do in the futures literacy interventions, is super helpful, super interesting, fascinating, and the field is growing and learning.
Good, great. We already decided to keep it in around an hour, this conversation. Lots of questions and things like that popped up in my mind, but I just want to stick to our previous decision. That's why for now, and at the end, I want to ask you to share something that you think I forgot to ask or you want to stress on it as the last but not least point.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, what I try to stress wherever I talk with about futures literacy and why I like it so much is that we have four elements here in this field. We have a solid theoretical background in the theory of anticipation from relational biology, Robert Rosen, Aloysius Lewin, and so on. So, and that's an amazing theory. I like it, and it makes me maybe more confident. There's a solid ground on which I'm standing, and we're standing, I think. So that's super helpful. We have, second, the idea of the competence of futures literacy. So it's something that you can train, that something that you can strengthen, that you can practice, of course, and that actually everyone has, every human being, every living being anticipates. So there's some basic competence there, but you can boost it. So theory, competence. We have a method which we talked a lot about, the Future ZTC laboratory is super flexible. Depending on the context, you can design it in very, very different ways, have a very different focus. And by now, we have a lot of practice. That's the fourth element. We have a lot of practice around the world on what happens when you work with people in this way. A lot of research that has been done, lots of publications. So these four elements together, to me, make the thing whole, complete, helpful, and yeah, I hope people um, see it attractive as I do.
Of course. And thank you, Stefan. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. It's really inspiring to hear how you brought together people, numbers, and imagination to help shape more meaningful futures. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. If this episode made you think or sparked a new idea, we love to hear from you. You can find us on LinkedIn or in the Peru community space. Also, we are sharing LinkedIn profile of Stefan in the description. You can approach him if you want, connecting, following, and he already published many articles as well. If you want to learn more about futures literacy or what he's busy with, you can check them as well. And as I remember, next week, am I right? There is uh, an online event you are facilitating both.
Videos of cities, like Freak Friday, yes.
Yeah, they can find it as well. Maybe also we are sharing it, I mean, resharing in our different channels, then people can see because I think we will publish this episode after that event. Yeah, earlier we are publishing it, then maybe they can see more information, those who hasn't, I mean, listened to this episode. And finally, don't forget to follow the podcast and share it with someone who might enjoy it too. Thank you again, Stefan. I enjoyed a lot. If you have any last word, I'm more than happy to hear.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for connecting, and thank you for helping spread the ideas and the competence.
I appreciate your time. Until next time, stay curious and, of course, keep imagining what's possible. Thank you.